Hello friends, welcome to the next DotVVM Virtual Conference 2022. My name is Thomas Hersek. I'm one of the founders of the DotVVM project, an open source framework that helps you to build modern web applications with just HTML and C#. Today we have several sessions prepared for you. We have amazing lineup of speakers. Most of them are participating on the DotVVM project and actually implementing features in the DotVVM framework or in the DotVVM ecosystem. So I will just share a few news about what's new in DotVVM 4.0, which was released a few weeks ago. And then my colleague Maxim will be talking about Bootstrap 5 pack of controls which we are preparing for DotVVM. Then my colleague Milan will be talking about using static commands, JS directive, and other amazing features of DotVVM. And then I will be talking about some enhancements we have made in DotVVM Business Pack 4.0. And finally, last but not least, I will be sharing some pieces of what we are preparing for DotVVM 5. There are two big features which are already in progress. One of them is DotVVM dynamic data, which allows you to generate user interface based on your data model. So you model the database and parts of UI are generated automatically based on the data annotations. And also I will be showing a demo how to run DotVVM applications within a MAUI app, which helps you to build multi-platform web applications and host them in a native window, or it allows you to create very interesting combinations of desktop applications and web applications in one process. So that's the agenda for today, and we will be also here with you tomorrow, where my colleague Andre will be talking about Roslyn analyzers, which are new in DotVVM 4.0, and also he will share some news about what new API you can use in data binding expressions, and also he will be talking about validation and how we plan to enhance validation in DotVVM 5. Then another developer on the DotVVM team, Standa, he will be talking about React components and how you can embed and host these components in DotVVM. And then our DotVVM developer advocate, Daniel Gomez, he will be talking about JS directive and he will show some very cool demos about using ML.NET library. And finally, I will just say goodbye and thank you and share some plans for the next events where you can meet the DotVVM team. So if you are new to DotVVM and you haven't seen a lot of things about DotVVM, basically it's an open source framework which has two main goals. One of them is to help you build new web applications using model view model approach. So if you are used to use MVVM in WPF apps or in Xamarin, then you will find this approach to be very easy to use, very familiar, and you can start building web apps right away. And if you have some old, for example, ASP.NET Web Forms applications that you need to maintain or extend, DotVVM is one of the ways that can help you to get these applications to .NET 6. Basically, if you have never seen DotVVM, it's an open source framework. It's developed on GitHub. We are members of .NET Foundation, and DotVVM supports both new ASP.NET Core platform as well as old ASP.NET. So that's one of the key advantages of DotVVM. If you decide to use it, you can also install it into old ASP.NET projects, and also you can build the newest applications on the newest version of ASP.NET Core. DotVVM also has an extension for Visual Studio, so when you install this extension, you can just select File, New Project, and DotVVM, and you will the Visual Studio will help you to start, and it will create a new project with DotVVM packages installed. So that's very easy. And how the MVVM approach looks like in DotVVM, basically you have two parts. First is the view, which is a file with an extension .dot.html. Basically, it's HTML with few syntax extensions. There are some data binding, expression syntax, and you can use custom components. And the second part of every page is the C# class, a view model, which represents the state of the user interface and also handles all commands from the user. So if the user clicks a button, some method in the view model will be called and you can do whatever you like. Therefore, you can use DotVVM without knowing JavaScript. Of course, if you are a web developer and you know JavaScript and want to use it, it's perfect because you will achieve much more with this. But on the other hand, if you are just beginning on the web, it's very nice that you can only know HTML and C# and be able to write full-featured web applications. DotVVM also ships with several built-in components. There is about 30 components in the framework, from the simplest ones to the most advanced ones, for example, grid view. So if you need to create an easy-to-use web interface over the database, it's very easy with the grid view or repeater component. And DotVVM is seamlessly integrated into ASP.NET ecosystem. So for every feature that Microsoft will add into new ASP.NET Core platform, DotVVM can use this feature. So if they, for example, add the support for HTTP 3.0, then DotVVM will be able to use it right away because it's not, DotVVM is just a plugin to ASP.NET Core pipeline. And also, because it's just a middleware that you plug into the request pipeline, you can also use multiple different frameworks in the same app. So if your application needs to publish an API or if it's using SignalR, no problem, you can use all these technologies in the same project. So that makes it also quite easy. Another way or another thing where you can use and take benefits of DotVVM is to modernize all legacy web applications. Some technologies in ASP.NET like web forms are not supported on the newest versions of .NET because it would be so difficult to port the platform without making too many breaking changes. So Microsoft decided to not continue with web forms. If you have web forms applications, you still can use this technology, but you need to stay on all .NET framework. And if your application in web forms, you still need to continue developing the application or you are doing maintenance, you need to implement new sections, new pages, then DotVVM can really help you because you can install DotVVM in this old .NET framework project and you can write new pages in DotVVM. And if you compare DotVVM with web forms, of course, the approach is much more modern. You have the MVVM, which makes the pages testable. So you can, for example, cover the pages with integration tests. And also the components in DotVVM are much more developer friendly, so it's easier to do many things in DotVVM than in web forms. So you can take benefit and build new pages easily, more easily than if you would continue using web forms. And also you can modernize this application because if you take ASPX pages one by one, you don't need to modernize all of them at the same time. You can just pick one and then the next week the second one and so on. And then you can just start replacing these ASPX pages with DotVVM pages. And once you replace all of the pages, which can take weeks, it can take months, maybe years, then you will be able to convert your project to .NET 6 because DotVVM is the same on all .NET and on new .NET. The syntax of the pages of the view models, it's without any changes, there are no differences. So once you get rid of all system.web dependencies and everything that is tied to web forms, then you can just update your CS proj and say, okay, I want to target .NET 6 and DotVVM will be supported there. So this is an upgrade path for old applications. It's not easy, it's not a magic tool which you will just click next, finish, and boom, your application is converted, nothing like this. But on the other hand, it's a way that you can take and within a few weeks or few months, you will have your application upgraded to the newest version of .NET so you can take advantage of all the benefits the new versions of .NET bring to you. So how to start with DotVVM? If you didn't install DotVVM extension yet, you can just run Visual Studio, go to the extension manager window, search for DotVVM and install the extension. We support the latest versions of Visual Studio 2022 and 2019, so please make sure to update to the latest updates of Visual Studio, because sometimes Microsoft changes some internal APIs and the extension for Visual Studio is dependent on these APIs. So when a new version of Visual Studio appears, we publish a new version of the .vvm extension. So we try to be compatible with the latest updates of Visual Studio. So update your Visual Studio, go to Extension Manager and install the .vvm for Visual Studio, and then you can just use File, New Project, and .vvm Web Application for .NET Core, and it will create you a new project on .NET 6 with the newest version of .vvm. So that's how to start. And now what you will see today, because this event is here because we had a release of .vvm 4.0 few weeks ago. It was a very huge effort the team made into this release. So we will be sharing and showing the newest features in .vvm framework. First, after this session and after a short break, my colleague will be talking about composite controls, a new way how you can build components in .vvm. And he will show you how we are using composite controls to build Bootstrap 5 support for .vvm. So in few weeks, we will be publishing a new product, Bootstrap 5 for .vvm, which you can just install to your project and use very simple syntax to get advantage of all Bootstrap CSS widgets. Also, .vvm 4.0 can integrate third-party controls easily in .vvm applications. So you can, for example, take a React component and you can just use it in a .vvm page. Sometimes you need to write a tiny little wrapper over the component, but it's very easy. Basically, it's just a way how to pass information from .vvm view model to the component and how to respond when something changes in the component. So it's not difficult to write this wrapper, and thanks to this you can host any React component in .vvm. Also, .vvm 4.0 contains several changes and improvements in validation framework. Basically, we were just preparing the ground for enhancing validation in the next version of .vvm 5. So tomorrow you will see my colleague talking about this. Also, we have implemented Roslyn analyzers, which help you find out common mistakes in .vvm view models, because not everything is supported in the C# view model classes. There are some types you shouldn't use because they don't behave very well when they are transferred to the client. So these Roslyn analyzers will tell you if you are doing something which is probably not right and which will probably not work on the client. And also, .vvm 4.0 supports several new types and new methods in the view models, so my colleague will also be talking about this. And also, we'd like to share with you our plans for .vvm 5.0. So we will be talking about a bit about .vvm dynamic data and how we are evolving this library, because it's not entirely new. It was here for several versions of .vvm, but the new version, which will probably have another name, will be quite different from the original version, and it should be much faster and much more powerful. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. And also, as I mentioned, you will be able to integrate .vvm apps into MAUI apps. So you will see a demo how my .vvm app runs in a desktop application, and the desktop application can communicate with this MAUI application, with this .vvm application. Okay, so this is enough for the intro. After a short break, my colleague will be here and talking about composite controls and Bootstrap 5, so stay tuned. And if you have any questions, just write them in the chat. We will be watching the discussion and we will be answering the questions in the chat when we're not speaking. So see you after the break.
So hello everyone. During this short session, I will tell you something about composite controls, which is a new way how to write code-only controls in DotVVM. And also I will show you a short demo of work-in-progress project, which we are currently developing, which is support for Bootstrap 5. So let's start with a few words about what is Bootstrap 5 in context of DotVVM. So basically, right now, when you go to DotVVM documentation, you will already see that besides basic set of controls, this native DotVVM controls, we also have a set of Business Pack controls, which are a special set of controls, and then we have a set of controls for Bootstrap 3 and 4. So, and this is basically the next upgrade of this package. And it's basically a package and or a set of more than 50 controls that gives you, as a developer, a clean and short syntax, and basically wraps around the native Bootstrap 5 controls, and gives you the same developer experience as with native DotVVM controls. So, for example, you can bind your modal dialog is displayed property to some kind of Boolean property in your view model. And so basically the API is practically very clean and short. And basically no other JavaScript, for example, is needed. So basically DotVVM makes sure and initialize everything for you. But because we are living in this new era when JavaScript is sometimes needed, we decided in Bootstrap 5, in this new upgrade, we make it so that if you want, you can still get an instance of this particular Bootstrap control and maybe modify or customize it to your needs. So JavaScript is not needed, but it's still possible. And what is composite control? So basically, composite control is a new way how to declare code-only controls, and this way of writing code-only controls was introduced in the latest version of DotVVM 4.0. And basically, what it gives you is basically is a very again clean and intuitive way how to write code-only controls. So, for example, as an example, I have here an alert control from Bootstrap 4. So, as you can see on the left side, we have this huge document with some kind of properties and some methods. And as a whole, it takes 182 lines of code to initialize and render this alert Bootstrap 4 control. And on the right side, you basically see the same alert. It's basically the same control, but in Bootstrap 5. But it gives a developer the same control API. So the properties are basically the same, and control has the same features, but it doesn't take so much lines to implement, and also it's very obvious what the control does from this method body, as you can see. So again, this old way of writing code-only controls, as you can see on the left side, is still possible. We still kept it in the framework, but for example, to declare a property for a control, you should declare or write 6 lines of code just to declare a simple string property. So how do we do that new way, and this minimalistic way, the better way? Basically, here on the left side, you can see a simple example of a image button component. So this is the name of the component, image button. And what it has to inherit from to be a composite control is inherit from composite control class, and also declare static get contents method. This method doesn't have to be static, but it has to be public, and it can return either one DotVVM control or multiple DotVVM controls, so enumerable or array of DotVVM controls. if we take a look at the properties, so to declare the property text, we can basically give it an argument as a, for example, string argument image URL, and this way we just say, okay, this image button control now have a string property image URL. But let's begin. Let's start from the beginning. This text property. You can see this a special class, which is also was introduced with this composite controls. And this special class, generic class, value or binding, basically says, okay, this text property can handle either static value, as you can see on the right side in this usage. It can either take just a simple static string test, or it can also take the binding. So I can bind my string property from view model to this property text. Also, it has a special attribute default value, which says basically, okay, this value or binding is not nullable, but it's not required by the developer to write this text property everywhere, because the default value for this particular property is button. So as you can see from the usage again, the only required property is click, and without click your page simply doesn't compile. But we can simply say, okay, this click is also nullable, and it also has to introduce a default value as null. Yeah, so the next one is iCommand binding property. Argument, and this basically says, okay, this click property can be mapped to some kind of command binding, so either a simple command or static command. And then we have this string argument image URL, and again, it's not required because it introduces the default value, but because it's not value or binding, but just a simple type string, it means it can only handle a static value. So as you can see from the usage, it's not required, but the last image button has this property, and it's overwritten by my image JPEG. If we take a look to the body of a method, it basically reuses the existing native .vvm control, which is link button, which is a simple A tag, and it also passes the property click by simply writing the set property method. And because of the Fluent API, right after the set property, you can just write, for example, next set property, or as we can see here, append children, where you basically say, okay, I want to render some additional components inside my A tag. So in this case, we see it renders some HTML generic control image, where we set attribute source with set attribute method to image URL. And right next to it, we render the new literal, which is just a simple text, where we set property text like to render the simple text. Basically, the rule is when, for example, if you ask when to use value or binding type of string and where to use string as a simple type, the rule basically is if you want to make some kind of changes when your, for example, client-side changes, when your page is already loaded, then it means you need to pass a binding there. So it's a good option to either introduce value or binding or e-value binding, which is an interface which you can also pass there to cover the whole hierarchy of types which you can pass to this getContents method. You can visit this page and simply take a closer look. Which is the next thing I want to talk about, which is also introduced in DotVVM 4.0, and it's very helpful while developing this code-only composite controls, are control capabilities. And this is basically a way how to couple multiple control properties together into single class, and also reuse, for example, the validation logic which you want to use with these properties, or some kind of rendering logic basically across multiple controls. So maybe just let's switch to the demo. And as I said, this is a work in progress, real project which we are developing right now. So shout out to my developer team, everyone. And here, as you can see, we have a special folder for all kinds of capabilities, because we want to reuse them across all these different Bootstrap controls. And very good one, or very good example of a simple capability is this texture template. So as you can see, we have to make the capability work or introduce. It has to be a record, and also it has to have this special DotVVM control capability attribute. And basically the properties which we before declared in this getContents class as an arguments, here we can declare just as a simple properties. It's what's also important. The feature was introduced in C# 9, I think. Are also the records and this init, which means it's not a setter, but it's a setter from constructor only. And yeah, so basically this particular capability has two properties. First one is nullable text property, and the next one is template or of type template. And our convention of this particular project, yours can be something different, is that every capability has some kind of public to controls method, which also can take all kinds of different parameters. These are different across different capabilities. And here, as you can see, basically we have some kind of validation. So user, when using this particular capability, user can use either text or template, or doesn't have to use both. So none of these are required, but user cannot use text and template at the same time. So here we have a validation with a DotVVM control exception. So please, it's not possible. So you have some kind of error in your code, and then we just make the same. We are just rendering the DOM as we did in this last example. So we have some kind of wrapper where we place some kind of CSS class. And then we just make all this logic around the text, and if the text is not null, and then we have template, yeah, with which we also return inside this wrapper, thanks to this template host. And if none of these conditions apply, then we just return null, because it's also a valid state for our particular example. Yeah, so here we have, because we have a nullability on our project, so Visual Studio is saying us, okay, it's a possible no reference return, but because we are in this control rendering world, it's perfectly okay to sometimes return a null. Yeah, so I don't have much time, so I wanted to show you two more controls. One is pretty simple, and the other one is more complicated. So let's begin with a simpler one. I have this spinner control, which is inherits from Bootstrap Composite control. If you go here, just to take a look at the implementation, here we say basically, okay, because you're using a Bootstrap, please add the required resource, DotVVM Bootstrap script resource name, which is a special script which we bundle together with a Nugget package, so everything works together. And again, we say, okay, because it's a composite control, it has one getContents method, which returns HTML generic control. Here, as a first argument, we have this HTML capability. So this one is a special capability, which is actually available from the box, from framework. And here we can see that it introduces this common properties which you can be familiar with when you, for example, used some kind of native control. So we have an ID, we have a visible property, and then we have all these different CSS styles and CSS classes. Properties. It means you can, if you want, to pass some kind of CSS class to your like this to your wrapper here. So here we're basically saying, okay, return me a div element, and also because we are in this spinner, we say, okay, pass here this visual CSS style for this particular spinner. If we go here and take a look on these enums here, we can see that we have spinner size, type, and visual type. All these three enums are like, except of Bootstrap text color, are like special for spinner. And if you take a look on implementation, we see that this particular enum has also attribute enum member with a value. So if we go right now and take a look on the Bootstrap 5 documentation, how the spinner looks like, we will see that it can be two sizes. So again, we here have two sizes. Then it can have a like different color, and there are two visual styles possible. So we have a spinner with a border and a spinner with a grow. So it has different animation. And also, yeah, for screen reader, we have here additional property where you can define what will be rendered for the screen reader's text. And so why use enums for these particular properties? Why don't just have strings there? Well, that's because in the future version of our extension, it will be like very easy to basically have an IntelliSense for this particular size property, because our extension will know that spinner size will have only these two properties. It can be either default or small, and so then your developer experience will be like much better. And also, what is great about this particular example, that we have this toEnumString method, which basically takes your enum and takes a look of this particular value, and then grabs a value from enum member attribute. So basically here we add a few necessary CSS classes like visual style and type, and then we also have this size issue. So when it's not default, we paste there this visual style, and then we concatenate it with the size together, so it will render the correct CSS class. Then we add a simple attribute like role status. It's some accessibility attribute. And then we also, for these readers, we append a child, some span element with CSS class visually hidden, and literal screen reader only text. Yeah, because the screen reader is additional property which is not required, but basically it's possible to override it and paste some kind of localized string there. If we can take a look, because I have it here, and we take a look on the spinner, as we can see that like this, all these different samples we have here, and this like works perfectly fine. Okay, so this was a very easy component to implement and to describe. Maybe let's move to some more hardcore stuff. Here we have a breadcrumb component. So for you who don't know what breadcrumb is, it's basically a component which helps you navigate through pages. If you take a look on the final results, so the breadcrumb, we can see it basically like this chain of links which you can basically, let's say, generate. And if you take a look on the, for example, Bootstrap 4 and API of a breadcrumb there, you will see that you can either pass a data source and basically say, okay, we have this particular binding for text, particular binding for whatever this item is enabled or not, and stuff like that. And or you can also pass there the breadcrumb items. So if you take a look on this sample page, as I showed you here, we have a particular project with samples, and if you navigate to breadcrumb basic, you can see that these basically are a declaration of some static breadcrumb items. So, but there's also possible to use this data source with some binding to links, and then pass their text and param ID and stuff like that, as you can see here. But how do we actually implement it with composite controls? So again, we have this getContents method with HTML capability. We covered that already, but the more interesting stuff is here. We have this special capability called item or data source. Currently, I think it's a capability inside. Yeah, it's a capability inside our project, like Bootstrap 5. But we are thinking about releasing it also outside, so you to the framework, so you can actually use it too. And here it basically says, okay, we have a items property, but also we have a data source property. So we can either use data source and generate the items dynamically, or have an items and have like static items on your page. And also yeah, so with the data source we have item template if you don't want to use like specific control, but want to use your template instead. And then besides this item or data source capability, we have list item capability, which is quite complicated capability. But what's important is that because we are on this parent wrapper element, we need to basically say here that for every property in this list item capability, we want to have a prefix item. It's basically it's a breaking change if you compare it to Bootstrap 4 controls API. In Bootstrap 4 we had this convention that every binding which you set on a wrapper parent control have this binding suffix. But here we decided that we use this new approach and use an item prefix. So basically if we move back, you can see that this breadcrumb item can have a text link ID, link 1, but when you use data source and you use this breadcrumb parent element, it's not just a text property, but it's item text. Yeah, and this particular rule is for every other property. So we have item navigate URL, item enabled, stuff like that. If you go back, what's very cool and why this like capability functionality is very cool, that basically it's because we can use the capability here in this breadcrumb, but the same capability is used in breadcrumb item. So as you can see, this breadcrumb item, which is also a standalone control, as you can saw, so we also use it as a standalone component, have in getContents only this one particular argument, which is list item capability. Yeah, and as you can see, sorry, as you can see, we have all kinds of different logic here. I don't want maybe to go like too deep into this, because it doesn't look that nice as a spinner, for example, but it's also because it's like more complicated control. But what's cool about it, that we still use like some we can still move some kind of logic, for example, to capabilities itself. So you can see we have these two controls capability, and because we use this capability across different controls, you can see that a lot of logic is hidden here. But like as a whole, this implementation looks actually pretty like readable, and it doesn't take 184 lines of code to understand, and you don't have to like scroll through it all the time. Yeah, and the same applies for this parent breadcrumb. Yeah, and yeah, so the last one is here is some kind of divider, so you can also pass it as a CSS style argument. Okay, so this way, you can actually, I showed you like two Bootstrap controls. One is more complicated, one is less complicated. There is a possibility to still use the old way how to write code-only controls, but for what we are trying to do is that we're still like developing the .vvm framework itself, and we're still adding new features. So you don't have to use this old approach, but to use just only this one new better approach instead. And that's it from my side. Yeah, I showed you the demo, these two controls. If you have any questions about these composite controls, you can either ask here in the chat or use our community Glitter chat, where our .vvm community lives, and where you can also find all kinds of different questions and answers. And stay tuned until the next session, and thank you for watching.
Hello, welcome to my presentation about DotVVM and JavaScript. I am Milan Mikuš and I am one of the DotVVM developers. I would like to tell you something about new features in DotVVM that are intended to make JavaScript and DotVVM integrate smoothly and seamlessly. What's our motivation? Why would we do that? Like, whole premise of .vvm is like you will write less JavaScript if you use .vvm. That's like selling point, right? Okay, well, in modern application you cannot really avoid JavaScript, and there are tons and tons of awesome components that we want to take advantage of. There is like whole JavaScript framework, and we decided that it's about time to make .vvm integrate with this whole ecosystem much more seamlessly. If you have any questions about what I will be talking about at any point, you can write it in the chat, and later we will answer them. So, first thing first, I'm going to show you something about each feature in a presentation. Then I will show you a demo where all the things and all the features that I will be showing you and telling you about, I will show you how they are used. Okay, so first feature that is intended to integrate .vvm with JavaScript is are called so-called JS modules. Basically, how it is now is like you have .vvm page, and you have some kind of code behind in C#. You have view models, or if it's .control, you have view models and base type for the control. And now we thought, okay, we know there are JavaScript modules. So what about if we loaded module into the DotVVM page, and we could use the JavaScript module. By JavaScript modules I mean literally the feature of JavaScript, like module. We could load the modules into .vvm page, and then we would have this sort of code behind, but for the JavaScript code that would integrate into the .html files. Okay, so how did we do that? To set up this relationship, as you know, all the .vvm modules, all the .vvm resources like JavaScript and CSS files and such are managed in .vvm. They are represented as resources. Resources are registered in startup .vvm startup file. They are registered so they can be used in .html page. So the .vvm module for .vvm page is like a JavaScript file like any other. Therefore, it needs to be registered as a resource in .vvm startup. Okay, once it is registered, we can use it. We can reference it into .html file. That means control or a view, and so then it is loaded and we can use it. we can use it. Yeah. So there are like two systems, and when we go into the code, in the code we can see this integration in standard .html control. Let me make this bigger. That's it. Yeah, that should be clear. Okay, so we introduced new directive that is called add.js directive. Add.js directive references the resource that has been registered in .vvm startup before. The registration looks like any other registration, something like resource register something. Then when the resource is registered and referenced in the .html page, we can use it by name in the JS directive. The JS directive tells .vvm that it should load the code behind the JavaScript code behind file, the module into the .vvm page or control. It works the same for controls. In control we have now we have for control code behind. As always, we have the control, and we have the reference to the JS resource, and the resource we put into same folder, and this is ordinary JavaScript module file that is referenced using this directive right into the page. When it is loaded, it can be used. So, how to? There are two ways how to work with JavaScript modules in .vvm. Of course, we will reference the one or more modules as a resources from using the JS directive in the .html file, but there are basically two ways to do it. You can directly reference the modules. The modules, of course, can reference other modules and so on and so on. Or you can use bundler. The bundler at present doesn't support as many frameworks do it. For example, React, that they will bundle whole application and into one file. That is not how we do it currently in .vvm, because we still need the resource to reference from using the JS directive in the .html page. So what we need to do is whatever bundler you use, for example, Webpack or Rollup or any other, you need to bundle all the modules, but to make it so there will be one output JavaScript file per page or per control. So I would like to have my I will have to figure out how to move my myself so I can show you the other picture. Okay, that's it. Thank you. And what is happening here is we take all these modules that reference each other, we bundle it using a bundler. The result is one JS file that can be registered in .vvm as a resource, and then can be then the file can be referenced into the .html page or .html control. Currently, we are working on templates that will do this for you. It's still in development. We will keep you updated on this. It's one of our projects. In my example, I will be showing you the direct route. I will not be using bundler for simplicity's sake, because there is a lot of code that needs to happen to set up, for example, rollup to produce one bundle per page or control. So I will be using this direct approach, the modules that reference other modules, and the root module is referenced then in the .html page. So let me tell you about how actually we are using the modules, the JavaScript modules, to take advantage of the JavaScript world. Our thinking was like this. Okay, we have control code behind and view models that themselves have like life cycle, and JavaScript modules doesn't have any. They don't have anything like that. They are just basically they function as a static singleton classes that are loaded once, and then so long as the page lives or is loaded into the browser, the module is also loaded. They are loaded once on the start of the page, then they never change. So we invented concept for .vvm JavaScript module support that we call view module. View module, it's because maybe it's not that awesome name, because we have view models and can become confusing, but this is view module. So, and the thinking behind this is that it is a module that is loaded for a view that is coupled with a view, with a page or with a control. We were looking for concept that with pages, this is not as visible if you do not use SPAs, single page applications, but in controls, one of the things you have to ensure when you have some kind of JavaScript code running on the background, that the code is initialized when the control appears in the view. And if the control, for example, in repeater, there can be multiple controls that go into view and go out of view, for example, as you page. So we made construct using JavaScript modules that will make managing life cycle of your JavaScript code easier. We call it view modules. And view modules is nothing else but one object that is created and exported from the JavaScript module file loaded into the view. I will show you in the code. For example, this is one such control that references JS code, that references JS module. It is loaded, and in the JavaScript file, you can see we have a class that represents some kind of logic that we want to provide, and this object is created, and then it is provided as a default export for this JavaScript module. And we call this default export class view module. And the view module has its constructor. It can have destructor, and there can be public members, and those public members then can be called from .vvm markup file. So the view modules are different from JavaScript module concept in that this object, this default export object that we call view module, is initialized with a page or with a control, and it is destroyed after the page is navigated from or the control falls out of the view. That means it is paged away or the control is hidden with including page and so on. And to make your life easier when doing your calls into the JavaScript module code, we also carry context that contains the most important properties that can be useful to have in the context of JavaScript code. It carries properties for .html controls, .html controls. It carries it carries properties. It carries. It also carries registered other content that I will show you later. And this defaultly exported view module can have one instance per control, as opposed to JavaScript modules that are loaded once on the start of the page, and then they are basically function comparatively to static classes in C#. So those are the differences between JavaScript module concept and what we call view module. I will refer to this defaultly exported object from view module from module referenced in .html page as view module from now on. So the life cycle of the view module goes like this. It is initialized with the page or control. The initialization is called to a constructor. This replaces what before you had to subscribe to .vvm event init if you wanted to make initializations in JavaScript code that required .vvm to exist. Now you can simply put it into constructor of the view module, and you will have full .vvm, you will have bindings, you will have almost everything initialized. Then when the page is navigated from, if you are using SPA, single page applications, or if you are using the module in .control, if it is navigated from, destructor is called. You can call your own code. For example, if you have something on the control that you want to free some JavaScript objects from the control, hide something, you can do it in destructor. And the communication, and we have a way now that from static command you can call the public properties, public functions in the view module. So it is very easy. You just define a function in the view module object, and then you can call them from .html page. And next I will introduce you to the named command concept that we introduce specifically so that you can define a command inside of .html page using static command, or in fact normal command right into the .html page. You can then call this named command from the view module. Before, this functionality was really hard to do. People usually did something like they used hidden button and they clicked it from JavaScript code, or some hack like that was not very elegant. Now we have really elegant way to call our command code from JavaScript. You simply call it as a named command from JS module. So these things come together as sort of JavaScript friendly tool set. We have what I've been talking about is like this is the way you call the named commands from the view modules JavaScript code. We have static command that are just C# translated more or less to JavaScript that you can call server-side code from. You can also call JavaScript code from the static commands using JS invoke. But when you are using JS invoke, you simply invoke the public function of the module that is loaded into your .html page or the control. We support Lambda functions both in commands and static commands. So that means if you have for example named command that requires parameters, you can use Lambda function, and then in JavaScript code you provide arguments to the code. And we have, you probably already know, we have service directive. This is way to reference services that are then injected into your page, and you can reference them by their name, and you call whatever function on the C# class class you want. I will show you in the code now. In our more modern projects, we now use this kind of C# JavaScript mixed architecture. You see, I have in my page I have reference to actually. Let me show you dashboard from the demo. That's a little more complicated. I am referencing this dashboard UI service. This is C# class that is like created using dependency injection. The dependency injection provides for us all the required services from the business layer, provides for us context, and you can from this instantiated service class you can call public methods decorated with allow static command. So using this approach, you simply reference this service like so, and this creates instance of the service class, injects it into the page using dependency injection, and when referencing the service, you can simply call the service using service dot and I call here dashboard users, for example. So when I am added, I will also show you the named command. This is the name command control that is used to create commands that can be referenced from JavaScript code. So we have now this service class. We have JavaScript code referenced as dashboard.js. The source code for the dashboard.js is in this dashboard.ts file. It will be compiled on save, and this dashboard.ts file has instance of the view module, has this view module class that the add.js creates instance of. It contains public method that we can call from the dashboard.html file when we need to call JavaScript. As you can see, it is ordinary module. We use import like so. We use export. And this provides us with, and of course every page has its view model, as you know from the older versions of .vvm. So in this way, you have this hybrid C# JavaScript architecture. You can use view models to store your state in C#, and do things on server side using view models as you are used to. You can use services, service classes that you can inject, and then you can call them from static commands. Usually this is used to load some additional data. You can see here the service class is used to fill user info. And then we have finally last piece of the puzzle, the reference to JavaScript module to reference our view module, and from the view module we can call the JavaScript using underscore JS invoke, and we provide name and we provide parameters for the function that we want to call from the JS module. Is the register hub function. It is over here. Register hub takes these arguments from our .html file, and this .html file provides the arguments. It passes them right here, and then we can call register. In this instance, we register some signaler hub. This is the new idea how to perform your hybrid C#/JavaScript workload. Now I really like how now we finish this feature. It comes all together. This comes all together, and now we can seamlessly go from JavaScript to C#, back to JavaScript to .html files, to controls. And I have tried it on several of my projects, and I really loved it. For example, we had one application that we needed to integrate into Teams. Of course, the Teams API is strictly JavaScript based, React based. So we used this hybrid approach to initialize what we need from the JavaScript API. We used React controls and or referenced some purely JavaScript controls, like so. This is about the named commands. I already talked a bit about the named commands, but now I now properly I will what they are used for. They are used for if you want to call some method on the server side from JavaScript code. You defined this named command in the .html file using let me get rid of the preview of myself. Yeah, so now you can see it's named command refresh questions. It is simply a control, but what the control does, it on the background it makes it possible for the view module to call the refresh question command. In the view module, it is called like so. You use the module context that I mentioned before, and you call it by name. You can also use lambda over here. And if you use lambda, you can pass arguments in view module when you call it like so. Here we would pass the arguments. The named commands also support tasks, so you can run, for example, if your service has some asynchronous operations that you want to call, you simply use task for this. There is no problem. The commands, the named commands that are asynchronous, they are translated to use promises on the JavaScript side. So basically, it creates sort of this bridge and makes this really useful tool when you basically have asynchronous server operation that you will evade here in JavaScript module in the view module. So now I will show you the demo. This is my GitHub where you can find the demo. This QR code contains this link, so you can use that also. And now to the demo. If you, I realize that like the demo has some complexity to it that need like some time to look into, but you can find it on GitHub. You can also comment on it if you want to ask anything about the demo. I will be glad to extend the demo or using this example show something. We have this. I did this kind of copy of Slido or similar application that you use to ask questions. On the background, it uses Signaler. So basically, I connect. I am here as a connected user. You can go to the dashboard either using the link or using the QR code. The QR code is purely JavaScript control that I used, and I used view module to initialize the QR code control. I will when I open another tab, I can connect as a second user, and I can ask question like and it's connected using Signaler. So when we ask something, and we can like it, and the most liked question goes on the top. This app took me like little more than 8 hours with styling, with everything to do, mainly thanks to the JS modules and to the connection to the new possibilities that we created in the .vvm to connect. So I will show you first the QR control. It's very simple control. Basically, it's basically empty, has no view model, but I use it as a JavaScript control. Here I just reference the view module. In the view module, in the constructor, in the module context, that is the context that is provided with context of the control the module is created from. So we have element. It's an element. The first element of the elements array is the element wrapper of the control of the dot control, and like so you can reference it to create the new QR control, and just like so, with minimal effort, you integrate it purely JavaScript control into the .html page. Here is the reference of the control. It is used like any other custom markup control, QR like this. There is only one little complexity you will find in the demo. On the start, when I started the lecture, I told you that you need to actually register and reference the JS the module that the view module is in. You have to reference it as a resource. So we would have to do something like, oh, this is not what I wanted. It's too happy to provide me with useful advice always, because I am one line higher than I should supposed to be. We would have to reference the module, the JavaScript module, because it is registered in .startup as a resource. We would have to reference it something like this, by name, like that. And you can do it. There is nothing wrong with doing this. This is usually how we do it in smaller projects. We will just reference it. We will just reference the module. This will, on the background, it will create JavaScript code. It will create JavaScript block that references or basically the JavaScript source block. I can show you. When I put inspect, basically this reference does nothing else. It just creates some reference to the script as so. As you can. So, but to avoid this, we do a bit of trickery. We have base for all our markup controls and also for our view models, that when it's loaded, it by name, by convention, it tries to register if it exists. The JS module, JS resource module with the same name as the control, and also if there was CSS file next to this, it would try to register that resource also. Its own init so this is just like simplification that we use on our projects that helps us register by convention the JavaScript modules and the CSS style sheets. We were discussing about that we could do something like this in .vvm, so that would be some kind of auto discovery. And another bit of trickery is what I was saying before, that we need to register the resource file for the module as you would normally do. Those are libraries are registered just like you are used to using file resource location registered as so, and with this file resource location, but we also in this sample I provided some simple code that again it's a bit of trickery. It tries to traverse all the page, it tries to traverse the page directory, and it tries to also traverse the control directory, and it tries to register all the files on the server that are in the correct directories together with the .html files, and it basically traverses the directories and auto registers all the JavaScript and style sheet files with the convention under the resource name by convention, and then this name for this instance it is QR code link dash JS, and it's registered here by this routine. It's auto registered. That's why and then it's auto edit in this code behind it is auto edit by convention, and that's why everybody that creates new code behind or page can just simply use add JS directive like this. It's a bit of code, but you write this code once, and then you just have to use this base class, and like everything is registered for you. So it is thing you do once when you set up the project, and then basically you can reference the JS module simply using the JS directive, and it will be registered as a resource, and the resource will be auto edited into the page. You can simply reference it here. So this is one interesting thing I wanted to show you. Another is that we can, of course, in the modules we can import other modules. For example, I have this base class that registers signaler components. We use here we use a library Microsoft Signal R that is for simplicity. Normally we would use something like Webpack or for example Rollup to just bundle together to bundle together the referenced libraries, and it would just work. But for simplicity's sake, I did bit of hack. I put the libraries here in the VVV root. Here you can see the QR code library. Here you can see the SignalR library, and then the library is like bundled using Webpack. So the module becomes part of the module becomes part of the global window namespace, and in the module I reference it like so from the window namespace, and then I use it as I would use it if you imported it using the import. This is I do this only because I didn't want to get Webpack and Rollup involved on top of everything. So I just in here I just initialize the signaler connection on the register hub. This is the function that is called when new user connects, and then we register these abstract methods that are then overloaded in the dashboard module. The overloads are like so. One of the overloads calls named command and refreshes the users. Another calls the named command that refreshes the questions. Yes, of course, we could do here some magic that would transport the objects of the changed users using the signaler connections. For the demo, I just wanted to show how to use named commands. If we wanted to transport some objects, there would be just more logic involved, but it would be perfectly possible to do also. And the page. By the way, this whole demo doesn't use any command bindings. Everything is static command. When you use this hybrid approach, there is basically no need to use commands at all. I use my view model. View model I use only as a data storage and for the client side, and to do some initial loading in pre-render. I load the questions here. It would be possible to load the question and users in the view module, or use some other control that would like load it on demand. I decided to do it here in pre-render, so I did it like so, and then also basically in this hybrid JavaScript approach, on the view model reduces to DTO that has some more logic, for example root parameters, and you can also check if a user is authorized and some such. Then we have this dashboard UI service. It is basically very similar to a controller in MVC. You just it is when you use add service directive in the dashboard page, you just load the instance of the service, and the service is injected, and you can call these methods as you please. I prefer to do the architecture to divide business services. So like in the UI services, I usually have code that is strictly UI related. For example, if I was using some kind of exception filters that would catch exception and, for example, show it in the .html page, I would do it here. I would put the authorization attributes here, and also in new .vvm, when you want to authorize, there is context.authorize. Authorization attributes are deprecated now. Now you would authorize like this. You would put in roles and everything. So this is like UI. So I keep the UI service methods strictly as a strictly I do UI related stuff there, and all that has to do with some business logic I do in facades or separate services or use cases, or whichever you prefer to use as your backend. And lastly we have the page itself. that joins all this together. It has data from the view model. It has functionality from the service class. By the way, it doesn't have to be called service. I was just lazy. I called it service. And so it comes nicely together, like so. Using the named command, I load the users and questions. There is nothing more to it. If you have any questions, ask or the GitHub repo, or ask here in the chat. And I hope this new addition to DotVVM will make your experience with dealing with JavaScript /C# controls more pleasant, and that you will love using it. Thank you for your attention.
Hello again to all of you who are watching us and who are staying with us at DotVVM Virtual Conference. In this session, I will be showing some demos of DotVVM Business Pack, one of our commercial products. So if you try DotVVM, just the open source version, the things you will see are not there, but check it out because I think Business Pack can really help you in making more beautiful and more stylable user experiences in your DotVVM applications. So we have published DotVVM Business Pack 4.0 together with DotVVM Framework 4.0. We are trying to publish all the versions of our libraries at the same time, at the same day. So when you update to DotVVM 4.0, you have also the Business Pack and the Bootstrap for DotVVM component libraries ready to use and compatible and tested very well together. So what is Business Pack? Business Pack is basically a library with more advanced components. The DotVVM framework contains quite a lot of components, but if you want to build a large enterprise application with hundreds of pages, complicated forms, then Business Pack contains more advanced controls. For example, tree view, there are a lot of pickers for dates or for some smarter combo boxes or drop-down lists, and tab control, a lot of other things. There is also grid view, which has more features, and also the framework ships with a bundle of CSS styles, and you can customize these styles to make the controls look in the way you really want them to look. So it would fit your corporate design guidelines, or it would fit in the look and feel of the application. The problem is that front end is changing a lot. So if you have been using the Business Pack version 1, we wrote the front end in less, which is a preprocessor for CSS, which was very popular by the time when we started building DotVVM Business Pack. But later it showed up that less is less popular than Sass. So we started using Sass, using the Node Sass package, which was the default and recommended way to do Sass. However, this package over a few years it got deprecated, and now we had to replace Node Sass to Dart Sass, which is still Sass, so it's not such a big difference, but a lot of things in Dart are done in a very different way. Basically, the importing other files is using another approach. So we rewrote to Dart Sass, so now we are in Dart Sass. And also there were a lot of requirements and a lot of new features in browsers. However, DotVVM until the version 3.2 was also working in Internet Explorer. However, from DotVVM 4.0 and Business Pack 4.0, we have finally dropped support for Internet Explorer, which on one side is bad, because if you are still relying on this browser, you have to stay at 3.2 version, not 4.0. But on the other hand, this browser is not being used very frequently today, so if your users are using more newer browsers, or most of the current versions of the browsers, you can safely use DotVVM and Business Pack 4.0. And thanks to that, we could use CSS variables to allow you to very easily change the visual appearance of DotVVM Business Pack. So the first thing that can help you a lot is the CSS variables. If you didn't see how these variables look like, if you look at this piece of CSS, then you will see it starts with double dashes, and that's how you find the CSS variable. So you can declare the variable, and then you can use this variable to reference this value 3 pixels anywhere. So if you, for example, place this CSS in your page, then the buttons from Business Pack, this prefix, they will be allowed, they will get this variable set up. And if you look at the list of variables which we are supporting, you will see that this variable is actually used by button to configure the border radius. So that's why, that's how you can make rounded corners on the buttons. Of course, Internet Explorer doesn't support CSS variables. This was the reason why we haven't used the variables before. But now you can easily use it because we still don't support IE and we are only working on the newest browsers. We have a new page in documentation which describes the list of variables and how to style the controls, and it's very natural because if you open the developer tools in Chrome, you will see a complete list of variables, and you can in the Chrome developer tools you can just change the values and see what it will do. So it's very easy to figure out. So we are also preparing a special CSS class for dark mode, which will also be done by variables. So when you want a dark mode in your application, we will just apply some CSS class on the body element, and it will just override several variables. We are also thinking about introducing some kind of theme switcher control, which will allow also to store the value in the local storage or in cookies or in some other place. So basically, to allow the users to use the dark mode, you would just place one control in the page and Business Pack would recolor to the dark mode. So let's see how we can style our application using CSS variables. So basically I have a very simple page here. I'm using a BP checkbox, which I'm using to just toggle the one Boolean property is BP override enabled. And this property is not doing anything special, only it applies a CSS class BP override to the body element. So when I check this checkbox, this CSS class BP override will be appended to the body element. Once I uncheck it, this class would disappear. And this is how we can turn on the override. Normally you can just put a static CSS file which overrides the variables. I wanted to show that it's also interactive. You can switch this on, switch this off as you want. So for example, if you want to make some kind of larger layout for users who cannot see very well, that's how you can do this dynamically, because you don't need to load any new CSS files. You are just changing CSS variables and it will apply and propagate through the styles that are loaded. I have a lot of buttons because the button color, they are the different colors, and you can override all the colors of the buttons so you can see all the versions we have. I have also placed here several form controls so you can see text box, numeric up down, combo box, date picker. Well, actually, I'm a bit lying here because I didn't prepare the demo. My colleague, who is responsible for CSS variables, was preparing the demo. So sorry, and not I have put these controls here. My colleague Lukáš has put these controls here. So sorry for mystification. However, if I look in this style CSS, you can see I have some trivial styles that are used all the time because I need my page to look like something. So these are global styles, and this, if the body has the BP override CSS class, then I'm overriding some CSS variables. So for example, you can see the primary color, I'm using this turquoise color, and also I have some colors for hover and for accent. The same I'm doing with secondary, success, danger, warning, and all those classes. I'm also changing the padding. I'm also changing the horizontal padding, so there will be more space between the controls, and I'm also setting border color and border radius to 0.5 EM, so we will see. And also there are some control specific styles. So only for buttons, I want to make the round corners really rounded. So I have placed this insanely high value. However, it will be trimmed to the half of the size of the button. So no matter how big is the button, this will be full rounded corner. It will look like a pill. You will see it in a few seconds. So let's run the app. And you can see this is the default Business Pack style. So you have default colors for various colors for buttons, and also the form controls have some styles. So default things, default behavior, as you know. When I check this checkbox, the CSS class will be appended to the body, and the new values of the CSS variables will be applied. So now you can see we have changed the color. So primary color is this turquoise color, and also secondary is very different, and also the controls get rounded corners and they get different border color. And also you see what the insanely huge border radius does to the buttons. So these edges, these shorter sides are full circle basically, or half of the circle. So this is maximum possible border radius for the buttons, so they look like pills. So this is how it works. Also, when you open this combo box, you can see even the items have rounded corners, and you can tweak also the colors which define whether the item is selected or not. Same with the calendar. It's smaller, but you can still see all corners are rounded. Yeah. Business Pack comes actually with two visual themes. The default theme is called Enterprise, and if you don't specify it here, it will be applied automatically. So this is the default look and feel of Business Pack. However, I can change it to Bootstrap 4 because we were asked to provide a version of Business Pack which will be compatible with Bootstrap for styling. So you can see that now the buttons look differently, and you can see they are using the same colors as Bootstrap 4. And also these buttons, these text boxes are larger, so if you use it together with native Bootstrap things, it will look the same, it will fit the user interface of Bootstrap. So if you are interested, you can use Bootstrap style in the .vvm Business Pack. Yeah, you can see also the calendar is bigger and it looks more Bootstrap-ish. Yeah, so that you can use. And also the override works also here. So if I turn on the override, you can see something is changed, but some properties where you remain from Bootstrap because, for example, the sizes of things are a little bit bigger. So you can use these variables to customize how the controls look, and to demonstrate how the controls are powerful, let's open the DevTools and let's just see one of these resources. And this resource, their Business Pack gives you basically two resources. First is default CSS, which is the full CSS block of code for Business Pack controls. And there is Bootstrap for CSS. And if you look in this file, you will see, and I will do this, you will see that the entire Bootstrap look and feel is done only by overriding variables of .vvm Business Pack. So the variables are really powerful. We basically use the same CSS, only via overwriting the variables we are achieving the same look and feel as is in the Bootstrap 4. So you can see we have had to basically override almost all variables we have there, but you can see the Bootstrap 4 look and feel is just this override of the variables, nothing else. And if you look into any element and you want to see complete list of the variables the Business Pack is using, you can select any element in the page and look at the root definition, and you will see all the variables we have here. There is 71 more variables, so there is about like 100 variables, and most of them are global, some of them are control specific. So for example, checkbox size, you can customize checkbox size. So if I want to make the checkboxes bigger, let's do this. I hope that it will work because I haven't tested, so sorry it doesn't work. Maybe it's overridden in the checkbox somewhere, but let's do it here, maybe BP checkbox. Yeah, you can see this is overridden. This is overridden here, so maybe if I will change it on some other element, then it will be working. So let's do it here. No. Here I will have to, yeah, here this is overridden here, so I can just override it here, for example 40 pixels, and you will see now it's bigger. So the only problem is you have to override the CSS variable on the right level, not on the root. The BP checkbox is overriding this for checkbox and radio button. So that's the issue. Okay, so that's how you can use CSS variables to style Business Pack components. And we are preparing more documentation and also some theme builder where you can do it not in the DevTools but in the browser. So you will see a list of variables and you can change the values in the browser, and it will immediately apply to the Business Pack controls. Okay. Another package we have just published is .vvm Business Pack messaging, and in the previous session you have seen how to use SignalR in .vvm applications. The advantage of that, it works without Business Pack because it's just a bunch of JavaScript that you will place aside of your application. However, if you have Business Pack, then you can use a new component which is called, it's included in the package .vvm Business Pack messaging. And this control, or actually there are two controls, it allows you to use SignalR without writing JavaScript. Basically, you need two things in the page. First is some connection. So you say this page will connect to some SignalR hub, and it will listen for events. And once some event is changed, is pushed in the hub, and it will be delivered in your browser, then you can specify some message handler. So for example, these controls say that, okay, please connect to this URL of SignalR and listen for all the events that are present there. You also have an option to filter these events, so the page will get only the relevant notifications. Also, it's good for following the user permissions, so user can see only their own notifications, not all of them in the system. So that's what you should configure carefully. And then you can use one or more message handler components that will say, okay, if we see a method name called chat message, then we will add something. For example, I will add a message that I received from the connection. I will add this message to the list. So it's very easy, and thanks to the support of lambdas in static commands, this is very interesting because the chat message gets one argument of type message. So it's here, and I can just change my view model using this new value. So I'm just adding this value to a collection. So basically, what you need to do is to create a SignalR hub on the server. It's just a C# class that inherits from the hub class, and you need to configure it in your startup.cs and specify the URL. And then whenever you want to send a message in the hub, you need iMessage context instance. So you can get it in the constructor, for example. Be careful here. There is also iHub context, which is a SignalR based interface, but .vvm provides some abstraction over it. So in order to make static commands work correctly, use iMessage context, not iHub context. And if you use iMessage context, if you declare it in your constructor, you will get an instance, and then you can say message context clients all invoke method chat message and pass a parameter there. You can pass only one parameter or no parameters. If you want to pass more, make a class or a record or something that will continue several properties, and that's how you can pass multiple arguments. You can pass objects, basically. So let's see how this works. So I will switch to another project called chat, and as you can see, first start with the SignalR hub, and it shouldn't be very complicated because I'm just declaring my own hub and inheriting from hub. If you want to restrict the user not to see all the notifications but only some notifications, you can override the onConnecting or connected async method and read the user identity from the cookie, for example, so determine the user ID, and based on that you can subscribe the user to some groups, and then you can send the notifications only to specific groups. So if you want to distribute different messages to each user, then the easiest way is to create a group that will be called just the user ID and then send the messages to the group, so you will be sure that no other user can read someone else's messages. So that would be brilliant. In this case, I want everyone to see everyone because it's a one global chat room, so that's why this hub class is empty. I need to register it in the startup, so I have to basically say endpoints map hub and assign some URL, so hubs/chat. And now in my page I can just use this. I will create a messaging connection. say that I want to connect to this URL. Also, you can bind to some Boolean variable. So based on the status of the channel, you can indicate whether you are connected or not. So I'm using this Business Pack alerts to say, okay, I'm connected or I'm not connected. So the user will see if the internet connection is stable, if it works. And then I just have a repeater with a list of messages. It's just a normal list of some objects in my view model. The chat message, it has three properties: author, message, and the date of creation. That's it. And basically, I'm just showing, rendering these messages. I'm just using other CSS class if the message is from myself. So it will have another color, so I could easily recognize it. And then there is a very trivial, just text box and button. So whenever I click the button, I will send this chat message to my chat service, and I will also like make the text box empty so I can write some other message. This chat service is a static command service, because one of my colleagues, he was mocking me that I'm always using classic commands, not static commands. So this time I'm using static command. I can do that. And you can see I have just requested the iMessaging context in the constructor. And here I can say send to all clients chat message. That's the name of the method where I can, which is specified here in the message handler. So that's why you recognize which command you want to call. And then I'm passing the object, just the chat message object. You need to be careful that here you will get the chat message object. So if you try to get some other object, or if you make a mistake, then you will get some JavaScript error. So make sure that you will specify this type here correctly. And then I can just add the message to the list of messages. So let's run this. I will try to run it without debugger. Okay, it seems it's working, and I will open two windows actually, so you will see that two people can talk to each other. So first will be John, enter chat, and the second will be Paul, for example. Okay, I'm not good on CSS, so that's why this is not aligned to the bottom of the page, but no worries. So hi everyone. And you can see this is green because it's my message. This is someone else's message, so it's blue. So I can respond, and you can see that the messages are synchronized immediately because I'm using SignalR. So it's very fast. It's real-time messaging here, so it's very easy. And also you notice that these messages are stacked to the bottom. That's some kind of CSS magic using Flex layout, but it's very easy because the messages are appended at the end of the collection. So that's just some CSS trick, nothing special. So once again, there is the messaging connection, which is basically, typically it's once per page. Sometimes you may want to be connected to multiple hubs, so you will need one connection per each hub. I recommend to use this wisely because you don't want to have thousands of SignalR connections, so please don't put this in the repeater or something like that. Place it in the master page or in the normal page, and then you can have the message handler. And here is the filter. So if you are sending several types of the notifications, this is the way how to distinguish. This is basically the ID. Be careful, it's case sensitive. Yeah. So this chat message must be here, and here is just the command that will be called when you get the message, and the argument will be passed here. So it's very easy to work with this. Also, there is another fine thing in DotVVM 4.0. We have added this to browser local time method because the created date, it's in UTC. If multiple users from different time zones would be connected to the same chat, of course it makes sense to convert the times of the sending of the message to their own time zone, to the browser time zone. So you can use this extension method, and basically if this date is in UTC, then this method will convert it to the browser's local time zone, so everybody can see different time based on the time zone they have set in on their machine. Yeah. But it doesn't make sense if this is not in UTC. So make sure if you are using this, make sure the values are really actually in UTC. Okay, so that's the chat. And I have a third thing that I want to show. If you are using grid view and DotVVM Business Pack, you have probably used exporting to Excel or CSV or some other formats, because Business Pack was supporting this functionality for quite a long time. However, the library we were using for generating Excel files is no longer maintained, and also we have experienced a lot of problems with that. So we had to change the underneath library to a library called Closed XML. It's very popular. It's very nice. It's the API is quite user-friendly, so I was able to do a lot of things using this library without even looking in the documentation. So it's very natural, easy to use. And we have also added configuration API, so you can fine-tune how the Excel exports look like, because previously the grid view basically spit out some Excel file, and if you needed to fine-tune it, you basically had to load the produced file, change it, and save it into another stream before passing it to the user. So for example, basically you will create a new object, grid view Excel export settings, and you have some Fluent API methods. You can rename the worksheet that will be exported. You can tell do not start the table in the top left corner, start the table like make there 2 empty lines or something, or 2 empty columns, because you want to place some your own content, for example the logo there. Also you can easily say, okay, adjust the cell size so all the text will fit inside. That's very very useful. Also you can turn on the table header, so when the Excel is open, the users can immediately filter or sort and do things like that. You can also customize the rules for each column. So for example, you can say that the column that is bound to begin date property, I will be using some rules for. For example, I can ignore this column because I don't want to show it in to the user, or I can transform the value before passing it to the Excel. For example, to trim out the time from the date to have there just the date information and things like that. There's a lot of options, and also there is extensibility points. So for example, you can say after the library finished the export, you can still touch the file and you can still make some changes before the stream is produced. So you have a lot of extensibility points here. So let's look at the demo. I have to switch the projects again. So here I am, and I have a very simple page. There is grid view with several columns, and basically it's my very simple time tracking system. So I want to show the date when somebody went to the work, and from which time, at which time he came, which time he left the work. But you can see I am using the same property for the 2 columns, because first I'm just showing the date, and next I'm just showing the time. But I'm using the same property because it has the information date and time together in one property. And time is probably the same, the date is the same, but the time is different, so I'm only displaying the time. Here I'm calculating hours, but I want to append age behind the number, so that's why I'm using template column. So I can do this, employee name description, and I also have some buttons that can do something here. This is just the demo, so the button doesn't actually do anything, but in the table typically I have some columns I don't want in my exported file. And here is the simple export button. And you can see that I'm doing quite some configuration before I will give the Excel file to the user. So let's start. First, I need to find the control in the page, because the export needs to read the columns in the grid view. So basically, I need to add some ID to the grid. So that's what I've done. And I need to find the control by ID and cast it to grid view. Then I need my Business Pack dataset, which will contain the data for the export. I could use the dataset I have here in the page, but there is paging. There are only 15 rows. So if I use this dataset, then it means that I would only export the 15 lines which are currently visible. I want to make complete export. I want to export all the pages. So that's why I'm creating a new business pack dataset. I'm copying the sorting options from the current dataset, from the display dataset to my own, because I want to preserve the order of the rows the user had. And then I'm loading the items from my data service using iQueryable, so it's very simple. And because I haven't specified the paging, I will have all the data in my dataset. Do not send such a dataset to the client. Do not put this in the view model because it can be very large. But for the sake of Excel export, you can get this in memory and then it will be collected away by the garbage collector. Now I'm creating this grid view export Excel settings. It needs to know the type of the records in the dataset. And now I can do some configuration. So I can say my worksheet will be named time tracking. So when you look at the tabs at the bottom of the Excel file, there will be one tab and it will be called time tracking. I want to make it start on the row number 3 because I want to put the title above the table. So this is with start address. I want to make sure that the columns are wide enough to fit all the content inside. And also now I'm configuring some columns. So for example, I've named some column with this column name property to date. These names must be unique, but you can use these names to uniquely identify the column in the grid. So for column which is named date, I will just get the date out of the date time. Yeah? So this is the date time and I want to only pass the date part in the Excel file, not the entire information, because Excel would show both. Then for the begin time, I want to just pass time of the day, and for end date, and you can see I don't need to use this string ID. I can also use this expression. However, these two columns were bound to the same property, so it wouldn't work very well. So that's why I had to use these column IDs. So now I can also use this expression, which is strongly typed. It's great. And I also strip the date and keep only the time. For hours, I want to round the value to 1 decimal place, so that's how I can do it with a column value provider. This column value provider must be here because I'm using the template column, so the Excel wouldn't know how to render this because it doesn't like evaluate HTML which is in the template. It needs to know the value, so that's why I've provided with column value provider. And also I'm saying the column with edit button I will ignore, so it will not be present in my Excel export. When the export is finished, I can hook up here and in the first cell I can add the time tracking report and set some font size. So that's how I have placed the title of the report, and then I can turn on table headers, and also I will make this totals row in the table. So I have allowed the totals row in the table, and I've said that the third column with the number of hours will use the sum function for the total. And then it's easy, I am just passing these settings here and I'm exporting the file and returning it to the user. So when I run this, you will see the business pack grid view, which is here. You can see there are multiple pages, and when I click export, you will see that the report is customizable and it should look pretty nice. So you can see there is the title with the font size of 20. You can see here are only dates, here are only times, and number of hours. You can see the table can be filtered right away because these headers are enabled. And also you can see there are all the rows, not only the 15 rows which I had. And here in this column, here is the sum of all the hours in the table. So it's very easy for you to use for anyone who wants to make further analysis or further predictions based on these files. So that's how we've made the Excel exports configurable. So I hope that you will find this useful. The bad thing is that we had to change the underlying library that generates the Excel files to closed XML, but our experience with closed XML is very nice. It's a very good library, so I recommend you to use it even if you are not using DotVVM Business Pack. What are the plans for the next versions of Business Pack? First, we want to make our form controls behaving better on mobile devices. So when you will be using a date time picker in the next version, it will position the pop-up nicely on the mobile device, maybe on the full screen or something like that. We want to make sure that these controls can be used conveniently for the users from the mobile devices and on tablets and on touch screen. So that's where we want to invest some effort. Also, we have several reports of that some of our controls, for example, the tree view, are quite slow. So we want to make some performance improvements so the tree view would be very fast. We are thinking about rewriting it in the new way using either the React integration or the composite control approach, because right now it's written in the old-fashioned way. And also we have implemented a control called hierarchy repeater, which was previously in the business pack, but now we put it in the framework because it can be useful for more people. Also, I've already mentioned the control for dark mode switching, and also we want to look at PDF exports because also the library we were using is not performing very well today. So stay tuned. In the next versions, we will use some other solution or some other library to make beautiful PDF exports. Probably we will be using some HTML to PDF conversion library, because HTML and CSS, they have great way of customizing how the tables are rendered, including like repeating the table headers on all the pages of the report. So that's why we want to go this way, so stay tuned. And of course, if you have any questions about Business Pack, or if you have any thoughts or suggestions for improvements, let us know in the chat or contact us directly on our Gitter chat. We will post the link in the chat under this live stream. So thank you, and see you in 10 minutes in the next session about DotVVM dynamic data and MAUI integration. Hello and welcome to the last session of today's stream of DotVVM Virtual Conference. We will be here tomorrow also, but today I want to share what's new in DotVVM 5, which is not released yet, but we are already working on some of the features you will find in this release. One of the improvements we want to make is to make something better than DotVVM dynamic data, which is a library that can auto-generate user interface based on your data model. And also we have started working on a MAUI integration for DotVVM application, so you will be able to run DotVVM app in MAUI native multi-platform application, which can open some new interesting scenarios for hybrid applications. So let's look at DotVVM dynamic data first. Please note that probably we will use a different name than dynamic data, because this name was basically took from ASP.NET Web Forms era, but we think that it doesn't express very well what this library actually do. So probably, and if you have been using dynamic data, we don't want to break you up, so maybe we will keep dynamic data as is, and we will present this new improved version as a new name, probably something like Auto UI or something like that, because basically it auto generates user interface from your data model. Basically how it works, this library or these controls will look at your C# class that you have in your view model and try to figure out which fields should be displayed to the user and things like that. And of course, from just the type definition, it's not very easy to figure out most of the ways, but if you specify some additional metadata, then it can be quite easy. And there is a namespace called system.componentModel.DataAnnotations, which already provides a lot of attributes which you can use to provide metadata for properties in your view models. So for example, you can specify a label for the field and its description. So from this you can auto-generate the entire row in the form, because it's not only text box but also the label which describes what is the field for. Also, you can use display format, you can use various attributes to provide some styling hints. So this field is more important than the other fields, or for example, this field is required, so there should be some asterisk in the user interface. And these things can be done automatically using this approach. Also, sometimes when you are, for example, selecting something from the list, you can provide hints on how many items should be expected there, because if it's a small short list with 5 items, it may be useful to display radio buttons, but if there are 100 items, probably the user will need some kind of search experience. So we want to also extend these attributes to provide some UI hints for what control would be best for this selection or for this case. Also, the data models can express some interesting relationships. For example, if you are editing the address, there is a reference to a list of countries, because you will be selecting country from a list of countries. So in this case, we also are looking for some way how to indicate that this is related to some other data and to generate the user experience automatically. It would be great for CRUD applications, so if you are basically building an interface over the database which can insert, update, delete and select rows from some database tables, this tool can be very useful for you, because it can, by just defining the metadata for C# classes and for your data models, then you should be able to auto-generate most of the forms. And also we want to provide enough extensibility points, so if there is some special behavior, special button inside the form which can, for example, preload some data, then you will have an option to do this quite easily. So basically in the new version we are planning to have 3 controls. First is dynamic editor, which is basically a single field editor. So basically the input for this control is just the property in some C# class. And it will look at the type of the property and on its attributes, and it will figure out the best editor for this property. So basically that's very simple, and if you place 10 dynamic editors and just reference the properties, it should work, it should provide the form. Also, it can be because it can be quite complicated to make all the forms look like the same way, and probably in your applications you are using some CSS frameworks as a Bootstrap or some others, and they have special hierarchy of elements to build forms. So for example, there is some div with some CSS class, and inside there is a label, and then there is another div, and inside this div there is the editor control. And dynamic entity, basically it takes all the properties from the current data context, and it will try to render the form for the entire object. So basically you can pass a customer object there, and it will auto-generate the form for you. And because every CSS framework is using different hierarchy of the elements, we think that we can ship with some standardized dynamic entity implementations for Bootstrap or for other CSS frameworks as well. Or you can build your own, because we can provide some base class or some base implementation, and you can just change the hierarchy of elements and names of CSS classes and things like that. And not only for generating forms, also we are thinking about generating grid views. So if you want to use grid view, but you don't want to specify all the columns, you can use a special type of column which is called dynamic columns, and it will also look at the data context and figure out the columns automatically. So that's it. And also, before I go to this slide, I can show you the demo. So here I have the demo for dynamic editor, and as you can see, the dynamic editor, it will get just a property, and if it's string property, it will figure out that the best thing for editing this property is a text box. So if I look in the application, you will see that for string we have just a plain text box control. For integer, you can see there is a numeric up down, and if you also use some range attribute, also it will restrict the range into some bounds. Yeah, so from 0 to 10. I'm trying to navigate to the view model, but I have to find it here because my keyboard shortcut is not working for some reason. I don't know why. So let's see dynamic data. And we have dynamic editor view model, and here is my customer class. So you can see this is the string property, plain string, plain integer, and this is integer with range attribute, so it can even read the range and put it to the control, so the user will not be able to select the value outside of the range. There is a Boolean property for which dynamic data will figure out the best thing to edit Booleans is probably the checkbox. So I have a checkbox here. For date time, we will render input type date, so you can use the browser's built-in date time selector. We will also have an additional package for Business Pack, so it will use the Business Pack date time picker control, which can be also quite, it would fit the rest of your application if you are using Business Pack. So these final two controls are a bit more interesting, because I will skip this one, this GUID product ID, for a moment, and I will look at this. This is enum. So you can see we have enum with development and support items, and I have provided a display attribute and put some nicer names for this. If you want to localize your application, there is also a resource type, which can point out to a resx file, and resource name that will be then the key in the resource file. So if you want to use localization, it is possible, and DotVVM will respect that. But here you can see the combo box was generated automatically based on the enum. So it's very nice way how to work with enums. I remember that until now I was also doing collection with all the enum values and some strings. So now you can just annotate this enum with these display attributes, and the combo box will be rendered automatically for you. There is nothing, no collection in the view model for this. It's just auto-generated from the enum, which is very nice. And this product ID, there is one thing I like even more, and that's a convention-based configuration. Because sometimes it can be annoying to put all the attributes to all the properties in all objects. And in many applications, I'm trying to follow some conventions. So for example, if I'm referencing to customer, and I want you to select some customer from a list, the property name will probably be customer ID, or it will end with customer ID because it can be like created by customer ID, deleted by customer ID, and things like that. But the convention is that the property name always ends customer ID, and if it ends with customer ID, then it will be selector from the list of customers. And that's what we have here. So I'm in my DotVVM startup, I am extending DotVVM services with dynamic data, and I'm providing some configuration. And here I have property metadata rules, and I can say that for a property which is called product ID, I will use a selector of this type. And this type is also interested because it's a record, and basically it inherits from selector item of good, which means that the ID of the selected item is good. Yeah. So basically this selector item, it has only name and good. So there is the display name and there is the value of type good, and that's it. And I'm also implementing iSelector data provider, which is a service that is registered in dependency injection. And there is a method called getSelectorItems, and in this method I can provide the list of items from which I will be selecting. Of course, this is just an in-memory implementation, it returns a static list, but since it's a normal service class, I can use dependency injection here, so I can inject, for example, my DB context and load the product list from the database. Also, there is another version which can also take parameters, so if I need just some category of products, I can do that by basically adding another generic parameter here, the parameter type, and then I will get this parameter here, and I can use it to filter out some values. So it can be very useful, and basically when dynamic data sees that this is referencing to some selector class, like this product selector item, it will call this service to provide the items for this component. So it will render combo box, and it will allow me to select from the products, but this collection has to be backed up somewhere in the view model. So there is the only requirement that if I'm using this selector in my view model, I need to have selector view model of these items. It will find it automatically, it will browse the hierarchy of the view models, and it will find this item automatically, but I need to have it here. I can just initialize it to a new object, it will load up automatically, I don't need to do anything, but still I need to declare this in the view model. So that's the only thing. If I'm selecting from products, I need to have the selector view model here, and all the magic is hidden in this class, but I need to declare it in my view model. So that's how the selectors work. And also, if you don't want to use these editor fields for individual properties, you can use the dynamic entity, which is here. And here we have an implementation of dynamic entity, which is using CSS framework Bulma. We didn't want to use Bootstrap for everything. So here we are using Bulma, but in principle, it's very similar. And if I look in the Bulma dynamic entity class, which I have to look for here, go to... So if I look at this class, you can see it inherits from dynamic entity base, and basically I'm overriding the getContents method, and basically I'm calling getProperties to display, and for each property I will create this editor, add some CSS classes, and basically I'm using the composite control approach here, and I'm wrapping it in the div, add CSS class, and append it here. So if you look in this Bulma page, and if you look at the hierarchy of the elements we have here, so you can see div class field, inside there is div class control, and here is the text box, and around it there is field label, which is the person or company name, and that's it. So this hierarchy basically represents one form field in the page. So Bulma dynamic entity, it will go through all properties in the current data context, and it will render fields for each of the properties, and it will make sure the div hierarchy is here. And because there is a base class, you can implement your own version for your own hierarchy of CSS styles, and we will provide Bootstrap implementation and also some implementation in Business Pack, which will be probably using the Business Pack form item control we already have there. Yeah, so that's how this works. And also you can see that this form has 2 columns, and it's quite interesting because how to tell the control to render 2 columns. Well, it cannot render 2 columns, but you can use this control twice, and you can filter out properties you are interested in. So basically I have 2 columns here, and here I'm saying, okay, for this first column, render only properties which are in the group basic info. And here, in this second column, render properties from the column, contact info field group. Yeah, and if I look in the view model of my page, which is here, then you will see that I have marked my properties with the group name basic info. So this is the first column, and this is the second column. And also you can see I have an enum here, so I can select from email or telephone. Yeah, so it's here. Also, we have added an option to add some extra property. So if I go back here, we have property something, and you can bind it to some other expression. So if you, for example, want to add some calculated field or to put some fields outside of this address data context, you can, and the control will support this. Also, we are planning to add some hookups and extensibility points. For example, if you want to provide a custom editor for country ID, or for example, just want to place a button before the country ID editor, you can do this, and you can also use dynamic editor to render the actual editor here. Also, you can respond to changed events on some fields. So for example, when I change the country ID, I will reload the states using my states data provider service, and to get selector item, I'm passing address, so it will see the country, and based on the selected country, it will give me the list of the states. Yeah, so this is the kind of filtered selector service. It gets a parameter, and based on the value of the parameter, it will return some values. So for example, if I'm US here, so I can select from the US states. If I change it to Czech Republic, then the selector is empty, and there is also a logic that if there is nothing to select from, the field will just disappear. Yeah, so that's why the field has disappeared, but now it's loaded here again. Yeah, so this is the dynamic entity. I don't have a demo for dynamic columns, but basically it's another type of column in grid view. So we will put grid view in the page, and inside the columns we will put grid view dynamic columns, and it will render all the columns which you need. And also you can combine them with your own columns. So if you want to put some columns before the generated or after the generated columns, you will have the option to do that. So that's what we are planning for DotVVM dynamic data. The good thing on this approach is that we are using composite control, and we are pre-compiling them. So one of the biggest problems of the old dynamic data implementation was that it was using too much reflection, and basically on every HTTP request it was browsing the reflection metadata and generating everything in the runtime. We want this to be pre-compiled, so when the application starts, it will pre-compile these controls, and then all subsequent HTTP requests should be quite quick. So these were selectors. We will probably be doing some renames. This slide also mentions the new names, not selector item, but selection, because there are also some conflict with other classes in the framework. So we are still working on this. It's not ready yet for trying out, but stay tuned because I'm really thrilled about this. It can be very useful if your application is not doing anything special. It's just text boxes over data in SQL database. So that's what will be better in the new version. As I mentioned, the better performance because of the pre-compilation. Another area we want to focus on is to provide a way of building hybrid applications. Basically, it's a web app that is running as a part of native app. So for example, even if you have a mobile app, it can be this case because you can just run a native mobile app, and within the app there will be a web browser control which can load some web stuff. A lot of applications are actually doing it. Some applications are only this web browser actually, because all of their user interface is done like this way. And you all know a lot of applications like, for example, Microsoft Teams or Visual Studio Code or Spotify. These are all web-based applications that only pretend they are native applications, but they can be installed and they can also touch the native features on each platform. So they have more features in general than the web versions, because the web version can only access the browser APIs. However, this native MAUI app can on each platform call native system API. And also we want it to be able to communicate with the DotVVM app. So basically we are using WebView 2 control on Windows and WebView on other platforms as well. And we have made an integration so there is no HTTP communication at all. Basically we will exchange data between WebView and the MAUI process in memory using some communication channels. So there is it's not very resource intensive, and also we want to provide both way interaction between these two apps so they can communicate. So the MAUI app can detect what's going on in DotVVM app, and also DotVVM app can contact MAUI app, please do this native thing because I'm DotVVM, I'm in the web and I cannot do this myself, and also get the results later. So for example, DotVVM app can send notifications to the web view by calling this from a static command, and you can also pass arguments. So basically, and in the MAUI you can hook up for an event and you will get an event when DotVVM app calls this, so you can respond to that. And also the host app, the MAUI app, can also look what's going on in the DotVVM app. So for example, it can look at its view model, it can get on which route the application currently is, it can patch the view model with some changes, so it can modify the view model from the outside, and also it can call named command you will declare in your page, for example. That's the current state. Maybe we will add more features to communicate together. So let's look how this works. And also, if you are wondering about some use cases, recently in my company we had a project that basically it was like a point of sale system, and it included some kind of reservations calendar because it was for some sport clubs. So basically when you came to the reception desk and say I want to book a tennis court for 2 hours, they were opening the calendar and making the reservation. And it was an application written in WPF because there were many more features than the reservation system, and they needed a native experience, so that's why the application was in WPF. On the other hand, they also wanted the web user interface for the reservations calendar, so basically we were building the same UI for the web in a different technology. We were using DotVVM, but still WPF and web, even in DotVVM, it's quite different. So there were 2 implementations. If we had this, we would be able to host the web version within the WPF app. Even using CSS, we would be able to make it look like the native experience. However, this wasn't on our mind at that time we were implementing that, so we ended with 2 implementations of a very similar user interface. And also, if you look at some Microsoft products, for example Outlook, if you are making a meeting and you want to use the room finder to find some free meeting room, you will see that this experience, the room finder, is also done like in a web version. They didn't do it natively, they are hosting web version. It's also the same in the web version of the Outlook because it's easier. If you have the experience on the web already, it's easier to reuse it in the desktop application. So let's look how this integration looks like. I will close some things here. And for here I have my MAUI application. I have to use the Visual Studio Preview because MAUI isn't working in the latest stable version yet, but in preview it works. And if you look in the MAUI programs, yes, I'm initializing MAUI. This is coming from the template, so not my business really. And here I'm calling builder at MAUI.vvm web view. And this will configure the DotVVM application within the MAUI app. You can see I'm detecting the path here. Basically, I'm taking the location of the file and pointing to the hosted app directory, which is the directory in which my DotVVM application resides. So I have a DotVVM startup here, and I have my pages and my view models here. So you can see there is the page. We don't have the integration for MAUI projects yet, so the IntelliSense for DotVVM is not working here, but we will of course provide that experience later. And also there is some www root. I needed some JS module, so also I have some static files here. This is not very interesting, it's just normal DotVVM application. However, I'm integrating it in the DotVVM MAUI. And here in the main page, I have some user experience which is done by MAUI controls. So I have a grid here. Here I have a route, two labels, which are basically displaying on which route I am in the DotVVM application. So route and route name. And also I have three buttons here. One can get the actual view model state, one can patch the view model with some change, and one can call the named command in the app. And the last control here is DotVVM web view, and basically it's a web view where you will say the name of the route and it will show the page for you. Also, I'm responding to page notification received, so if the DotVVM app sends me notification, I can hook up to this event here. So for example, when I get the notification from DotVVM application, I will just display an alert. This is a MAUI function that will display the alert. So I will just display this. But you can, of course, handle this as you wish. The buttons are very intuitive. Basically, I'm just calling getViewModelSnapshot function on the DotVVM page control, which is my DotVVM web view, and it will give me dynamic with the view model. So I'm serializing it and displaying it to the user. Then if I want to patch view model, I can say, okay, set value property in the view model to number 3. So you can even send changes to the view model in the individual pages. Of course, you have to be careful not to break things up. And also I can call the named command. This will change this API because here I have to pass some named command ID, which is internal and it can change in any time. So I will find some way how to pass, for example, CSS selector to the element that can access this view module or something else. Because if you are using view module in the markup control, you need to say in which markup control you want to invoke the named command. So this will be some CSS selector in the future. Right now I'm using internal module ID because it's a demo. And I'm calling the increment by named command and I'm passing some values to the command. So let's, this is the MAUI version. Let's look at the DotVVM app. Basically, it's very simple. It's a simple counter. I have this counter value, printed out, and I have a button, and I'm calling the increment function in the view model, which basically increments this by 1. It's very easy. And here I have the named command increment by. It accepts one integer value and it will just increment the value by the specified number. So in my MAUI page I was passing 10, so it should increment by 10. And also there is a route link which is going to second page because I want to see that the MAUI app can detect that the route was changed to something else. And here is the last button in the DotVVM app, which basically sends a notification to the page. So basically it can send there some hello and also some arguments. Here can be any number of arguments. I hope that this will work. If not, I will remove the argument, but it should work. I want to support any number of arguments you want to pass from DotVVM to the MAUI. So let's run this. I'm using this on the slow machine and it's a preview version of everything in Visual Studio, so it's a bit slow. Of course, we will be making sure that this experience is a bit faster, but on the other hand, there are basically two applications in one process that have to initialize, so sometimes it can take more time. On the other hand, I think that in many use cases it won't be the problem. So you can see this is the MAUI app. It's showing me that I'm on the default route here, and also I have these three buttons. These purple buttons are MAUI buttons. Yeah? The DotVVM application starts here with the hello. You can see I can select the text because it's just the web browser. This can be configured to disallow text selection, so it wouldn't look so bad. And here I can, the .vvm app is fully functional. I can increment the values here. I can get the view model state, so this is calling get view model snapshot, and it will return me the dynamic representing the view model state. So I'm just showing it serialized as JSON, but you will get dynamic, so you can interact with the properties directly. And also I can patch view model, so I can say set the value to number 3. I can click and you can see it has changed. And I can also call the named command, which will call the increment by function and pass 10 as a parameter. So now the counter, you see it's 13, now it's 23 and so on. So it's very easy, and I didn't break, everything works. When I go to a second page, you can see the binding. It was data bound from the same property in MAUI, so we can see this value change. When I go back, it's back to default. It should be two-way, so if I change here to second, the web view should navigate to the other route. There will also be some API to navigate to routes with some parameters. And when I call the send notification to host, it will trigger the event for me, so it will display MAUI alert because I have called the event that the web view was passing to me. So these applications can communicate in both ways. So MAUI app knows what's going on in the .vvm app, and .vvm app can send signals to MAUI app, oh, please do something, because I'm .vvm, I cannot do everything. And the difference here is that now this is not the client-server model. Everything here is on the client. So in your .vvm view models, here if you want to connect to the database would have to be local on the user's machine, because this is now not running on the server. It's running in the same process as the MAUI app, which also means that you can interact native functions of the client's machine here. So that's also a nice thing that you can have. But if you need to work with some data, you will need some API, and the view models will be calling these APIs. And you can share these APIs with the MAUI version of the application. So this is the way how you can create the hybrid applications with .vvm. Right now, this is in the experimental phase. We only have support for Windows, but in this implementation, there are folders, Android, iOS, and Mac Catalyst that are waiting for our implementation, and the web view control is similar on all the platforms. So I hope that we will be able to support all the platforms, at least on the tablet machines. I'm not sure about the mobile devices because of the performance reasons, but at least on the tablets it should work very well. So this is the MAUI integration of .vvm. I hope that you like it, and maybe you have figured out already some nice scenarios where you can use this. If you have any questions or any ideas what sample applications for MAUI and .vvm we can do, please send the ideas to the chat. We will be happy to create some hackathon or some live stream where we can build these experiences. We also have another plans for .vvm 5. One of them is to improve grid view dataset, because currently if you want to load data using static commands or REST API bindings, it's not very friendly. So we want to make sure this is more extensible. It will support better types of paging than just page index and page size. Some token-based paging, for example. It should support sorting by multiple columns, not just by one, and you will be able to plug your own parts in the grid view dataset. So that's what we are planning to improve. Also, we want to offer validation for static commands, because currently validation works only for normal commands, and you have to validate everything in static commands by yourself. So we want to make sure this is integrated. And also we would like to have integration of .vvm with other frameworks. We already have integration with React, so you can take React component and place it in the .vvm page and it will work. You will see it tomorrow. But we also want to have integration with Svelte. We are already working on that, and it's in the preview version of .vvm, and also with other frameworks. So you will be able to host external controls in .vvm, make them access .vvm view model, and react to changes, respond to changes or events that these components are producing. So this can enhance what you can achieve in .vvm. So if you have any questions, I will be watching the chat, so I will respond. Make sure that you write these questions there. And also, I hope that you will find DotVVM useful either for building new applications or to modernize web forms apps. And we will be here with you also tomorrow. So if you want to see Roslyn analyzers or validation enhancements in DotVVM 5 we are planning, or if you want to see the React integration or JS Directive and ML.NET, join us tomorrow. We are starting at 2 p.m. UTC. If you are in Central Europe, it's 4 p.m. If you are in the US, it's in the morning. In other parts of the world, it will probably not be in a very convenient time zone, but of course the recording will stay here on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe our .vvm channel so you will not miss out on any videos. We will then cut the live streams into individual sessions, so if you subscribe you will get notifications that the videos are ready. So if we are not in time zone convenient for you, we are sorry, but you can watch the recording, and of course if you post any comments under the video we will try to respond. So see you tomorrow. I hope that you like these sessions, and stay safe, take care, bye.